guys, I'm Linda.
And I'm Vicky.
And we are Partners in Crime. Today we wanted to do another segment on Susan Powell. Again, we listened to the Cold podcasts, and we got some information from that, as well as other things that have been put online and on the internet. So we wanted to just go through, we went through what happened, and now we're going to go through the beginning and work our way through the Cold podcast and try to elaborate on some of the items that we see that stand out to us. So Josh met Susan. He used to hold dinner parties. He felt like, even though he couldn't afford it, he felt like it was a good idea to meet people and that sort of thing.
The dinner parties were with members of the church.
Right.
And they were specific groups in the church that people used to belong to. Mm-hmm. I don't know whether we call this a youth group.
Something like that, yeah.
And it was this group that he started.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what it's called. It's called the Institute.
Okay.
So it was for college age youth. Mm-hmm. And they used to, that's actually where he met Susan, in one of these groups. He invited them over to dinner, and she came to one of the dinner parties. He did work for Verco, and that's where his father worked as well. But he was worried about being fired because Josh's whole work history has been having jobs and getting fired or leaving because he thought he was
above it.
Yes,
right.
He just thought he knew more than they did.
Right.
So he did meet Susan in October of 2000. That's when he had this dinner party. And this was just weeks after her 19th birthday. So Susan volunteered to help Josh do the dishes, and per an audio recording, because there were a lot of audio recordings from him, and his father had a lot of video recordings, so we get a lot of this information from that. He said he loved her helping him do the dishes, and that's when they fell in love and they shared their first kiss. And Susan said that was the time that she knew that he was the one. So Susan met Josh on a rebound from a previous relationship, so that might be why she thought that. And Josh also appeared to everyone at that point to live the LDS standards, which he really didn't, but he put on a good show for people. November 11th of 2000 was the official start of their relationship. That's what they say. And they talked about getting married the first couple of dates, actually.
Right.
So
she was so young. Mm-hmm. She's only 19 years old.
Yeah. And Jennifer Graves is Josh's sister, who had issues with her father and Josh as well. So, but yeah, I agree. They were pretty young, and I think Susan's parents actually took issue with that.
Yeah, and Jennifer comes up quite often throughout this podcast about her relationship with her family and her brothers, and she seems to be the only one.
Right, that has it all together.
Yeah, she has it together, and she has a lot of insight on the family.
And what's interesting is Josh actually met Susan when she was 12. She knew it, she remembered him, he didn't really remember her. He says he remembers her and thought she was cute, but he was at their house visiting with her sister Mary, and he was playing the piano, so she remembers him and thought that, he was cute. And Josh really liked Susan because she seemed to take care of him, and she had good credit, so that helped.
She took care of him and his belongings, he said.
Which he purchased with other people's money. Yes. Josh said in his audio journal that he didn't mind going into debt because he might as well have everything now and not worry about the future. So that was his mentality, which you understand why that just contributed to all of their problems. And Susan and Josh then did kind of start living together. Susan's parents didn't know about that because she was supposed to be living with her sister Mary, but she actually did live with Josh. And then her father actually did talk to her about this, or presented this to her and said, what's going on? And then she said she just slept on the couch. And her father didn't like it because she would work 2 jobs, and she worked at JCPenney's, and she'd come home late, and Josh wouldn't go to get her. He just felt like, and I guess it kind of in that religion or something, that you kind of take care of people and you make sure they're okay. And maybe, around here, we would go to work at night and come home and nobody thought any different. But I guess in their religion, they kind of have to take care of each other.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a religious value, but
I don't know.
It's just common sense to me.
Yeah, but did you ever work late and anybody come to pick you up, like your boyfriend or your husband or your fiance?
No. No.
I used to be out and about in the dark by myself, plenty, driving here and there and everywhere. So that was just a little, I don't know, maybe she was walking home and then I would take issue with that.
Right.
So, like I said, Susan was working at JCPenney part-time when she had her hairdressing job. And then Josh said he wanted to get a present for his mom. So he had Susan pick out a ring for her to use her discount to buy it. Turns out this is her engagement ring. So, and the reasoning behind him picking out this ring, he didn't want anything too big or too outlandish so somebody could attack her for the ring. So he wanted something simple, but the best quality diamond is what he was saying. So that she bought with her discounts. So okay, that's his reasoning. She accepted it. That's fine. Josh and Susan were only dating 2 months when they became engaged. He asked her to marry him on January 5th of 2001. She did go to his apartment, and apparently he covered her eyes when she got to the apartment and walked her in, and there were flowers, white roses, and then there was a picture of the LDS temple that he had by the couch, and he had this, I forget what the song was, but he had this song playing, something about getting married or something like that, I don't know. But the temple picture was big, I guess. So he asked her to marry him, and she said yes. And again, like I said, her father wasn't happy about them getting married. And then Josh didn't have a concept of curfew and didn't have many rules while he was growing up. So a lot of that, they took issue with that sort of thing, and I guess Susan had an issue with it too, because he just didn't have he wasn't brought up to have any kind of curfew, or they could do whatever they wanted, him and the girls and his brothers too. Right. Josh thought he could win Susan's parents over after they got engaged, and then he pressed for a quick marriage in March or April of that year. Susan was kind of like, why so fast? She thought an engagement should be about 9 months to a year. Mm-hmm. But the reason why they speculate is because his first girlfriend, Catherine, got away from him. He did not want Susan to get away from him.
Well, also, he had a history of trying to date girls, or win girls over, and they didn't want any part of him. Yeah. And I guess he wanted to make sure she was going to stick around.
Right. And because of her religion, you get married, especially if you get married in the temple, you don't get divorced.
Right.
So Josh started spending Susan's money. She bought him computer parts since he said he needed it for school, And Josh's sister Jennifer thought that Susan was good for Josh because she thought maybe her being so good would, help him and he'd want to be a better man because of it. Jennifer did think that Josh was taking advantage of Susan. And, that's understandable. There was a warning sign late February while they were applying for their marriage license. I guess Susan filled out some information incorrectly, and Josh just had an issue with that. So they started fighting. Susan just sat by the door and said, "Take me home." She was done. I guess they were at the apartment. So he didn't. He just walked around the apartment and just let her sit there, and then he finally decided, okay, I'm going to take you home. So they get in the car, and instead of going right home, taking her right to her parents, he stopped at this place to make copies for the marriage license. So he made the copies, and then they made another stop to go to the post office to mail it, and then he finally dropped her off at her parents. And
I guess he was just
she was still mad.
Yeah, he was stalling, so hoping she'd get over it.
But nah, she didn't. Then Josh and Susan got married April 6th in 2001 in the Portland Temple in the afternoon. Jennifer also got married in the same temple, and Jennifer thought that Josh really wanted to emulate her life and do what Jennifer did because she seemed to have everything, and he wanted to have a marriage like that her and her husband did. Josh was late to his own wedding, so there you go. That says a lot. Steve Powell was invited, which is their father, Steve, and he wasn't allowed in because you have to be in good standing to get into the church. Neither were any of Josh's siblings other than Jennifer. Jennifer's kids had to stay outside as well because they were too young to go into the temple. And Jennifer said she was very worried about the kids hanging outside with her
them.
dad and her siblings, especially her sister Alina, because Alina, you'll see, she's all about her father and whatever he says she agrees with.
Right.
So Josh I guess they got married, they had a wedding night, and then they had the reception the next day. So they were saying that Jennifer said that Josh was more interested in the video camera, even, talking about his wife and how beautiful she is and all that kind of stuff. He wasn't into that. He was just into videotaping their time at the hotel and that sort of thing. Father and daughter dance. Susan's father did pick this song, Wake Up Little Susie, and he said the reason why he picked that song was because she used to come home late and then it'd be a hard time to get her to wake up in the morning, so he thought that worked.
Yeah, it's a shame it didn't work.
Yeah, Josh thought the honeymoon would last forever in their marriage, and he said, we talk to each other more than anybody else talks to each other. We just talk about everything, and he was saying how wonderful it was. Jennifer saw it differently and thought Susan just tolerated Josh because they were newly married, and all of his craziness and just all of his idiosyncrasies. Is that how you say it? Yeah. Sorry, I can't say it. She just tolerated because they were newly married and she was young. So Josh and Susan did get evicted from their apartment 8 months after they were married. They got into a dispute with the landlord. So again, Josh didn't like something, so they got...
And I think this is also the time he said he should be a lawyer.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't pick that up.
Because,
of course, yeah.
He knows a lot more.
Yeah. So the start of 2002, Josh and Susan moved into his dad, Steve's house, which, that poor girl. There were too many people that lived there. Josh and Susan lived there, his father, and then his two brothers. There wasn't a lot of space, so they kind of had to make a makeshift bedroom in the living room with a blanket or curtain.
Yeah, like a divider. They put some kind of sheet up or something.
Yeah. And it was hard for them because Steve, John, and Michael, his two brothers and his father, just came in and out all hours of the day. Like, they didn't have any respect for them maybe trying to sleep because they had to go to work and all that kind of stuff. So, and then Steve, the father, would videotape Susan all the time.
He was obsessed with her.
Oh, my God, that's putting it lightly.
Yeah, just an unhealthy...
Very unhealthy. Yeah.
Obsession with a daughter-in-law. Mm-hmm. Just such a shame.
And Susan would just tolerate all of that and the filming and that sort of thing. And Susan was pretty naive, so she didn't realize what Steve's intentions were with her. So she used to wax people at the salon where she works. So she waxed herself and she was all proud of it. And she's like, oh, look, it's been a week and no hair. So she had Steve feel her leg, God forbid. So he was filming it and he took it that she was coming on to him. So she also thought one day while she was in the bathroom, she saw a mirror under the crack in the door. So Steve also kept trying to undermine their marriage, Josh and Susan's. When Josh wanted to sell the futon he owned, Steve said it was his and Catherine's, which upset Susan. So he kind of just tried to say, oh, well, that's his and Catherine's, and they're newly married, and she's young, and she's going to be like, you know.
Why do you have that, you know?
Yeah.
Wherever he could cause conflict.
Right.
Because he was hoping to come between them. And
because then he would have her.
Right.
So, Susan said that living with him was a dark time. She also started seeing that Josh's faith was not strong and wrote about it in her journals and said how strong she had to be for the both of them. By March, they moved into their own place, thank God. Josh was working at Home Depot and Susan got a raise, but then Josh got fired. So Josh finished his courses that June and graduated from college. Steve was invited to the graduation as well as Susan's parents, who gave Josh money and a bunch of camping equipment. And I will put in their interaction between Josh and Steve talking about the presents that Susan's family gave. It's pretty interesting to hear that. So after Josh graduated, he couldn't keep a job. He thought he knew more than his supervisors and his co-workers. So he thought he would start selling real estate. Josh wanted to be a self-made millionaire since he did think he should be a self-made millionaire, but then his brother Michael went into the Army. So he thought briefly about that. And then Susan wrote in her journals about the pros and cons of doing that. And she just didn't want to be a widow.
Stuck on an Army base somewhere.
Yeah, she thought, it would be good because he'd be in shape. They'd have room and board. But then him going to war and maybe not coming back was just too much, so she didn't want that to happen. Instead, in early 2003, they both got jobs at this senior living center called Orchard Park in Yakima, Washington. Mm-hmm. So they were managing this place. They were managers in this senior living center. They did get an apartment, so room and board was part of their salary. So they worked there, and they were away from Steve Powell, which was a benefit too. Steve still visited them, and even though they were pretty far away, he still came to visit them. The one day he gave her a massage on her shoulders and her feet. And again, I will post the video of him talking to his video journal about this. I won't put the whole thing because it is creepy as hell, and I just don't want to put that on our video. It's just, I'll give you a part of it so you understand this man is really crazy.
Right.
It was probably the most erotic experience I've had in my entire life. I just hate to say it. I mean, of course, So I haven't had that many experiences, but Susan has been feeling ill. She had a cold. And I offered to rub her feet, to rub her toes, to give her some stimulation. That went on. I probably rubbed her feet, her toes, her beautiful feet. She has such pretty feet. Of course, everything about her is pretty, beautiful. I did, and I love that woman. She is so beautiful. Can't even get enough of her. Can't get enough of looking at her. She's so pretty. And I held her arm, and I held her hand. I cupped her hand in mine, her beautiful little hands.
So, Steve thought Susan didn't mind that he went a little bit further than he should have, and was convinced that Susan gave him her consent in silence to what would be considered a sexual assault. So basically what he did was not something you do to your daughter-in-law.
Newest member.
Verde.
I'm sorry.
No, we're not idiots. We don't butcher the Spanish language.
You don't. This is the newest member of Susan and Josh's family.
This is our baby.
Here, let me just get a picture of you two.
For years, Steve Powell lived with a camcorder in his hand, videotaping important events. Weddings, graduations.
Hey Josh, wave. There you go.
But look closer at these moments captured on camera, and you'll see a startling pattern. Regardless of the occasion, Steve Powell focused his lens on one thing.
Hold your hand up, please.
Susan.
Great. Now we will no longer look at your fingers. We will look at you. So, that's Susan. There's Josh. I want her.
To understand the family turmoil she endured, you need to see how Steve fixated on her from the very early days of her marriage.
Too close.
Steve's own journals reveal his infatuation became perversion and persisted through the years.
You know, she was very open in a sexual way.
And he was vocal about it after she disappeared, claiming Susan was a willing participant.
It was definitely a romantic obsession, yeah. I mean, you know, Susan's a beautiful woman, and when a beautiful woman comes onto you like that, it's really hard to resist that kind of a thing. I mean, maybe it's just me. Probably inappropriate, but I admit those things were going on.
But no one knew the depth of his obsession until investigators stepped foot in his bedroom.
It was a house of horrors when we went through there.
Police were there to retrieve Susan's childhood journals. Journals Steve spent years swiping and scanning. And journals Josh and Steve had intended to publish to paint Susan as promiscuous. But that plan backfired.
Yeah, that opened the door for us. That gave us the search warrant that got us into the house. That found that and much more evidence, yeah.
Inside a locked filing cabinet in Steve Powell's closet, police found evidence that his self-proclaimed relationship with Susan was one-sided. He stalked her, videotaping her from inside his car. He stole her personal items, her underwear, nail clippings, hygiene products, and he doctored photos of her and used his camera to build his collection.
20 to 25 detectives there, and we all went, wow. We were like, that's crazy.
So crazy, it bordered on delusion. Steve spent years convincing himself that Susan loved him back.
And I know she felt it. I mean, I know she couldn't have missed it. She's not naive either, I know, from what I've read in her journals. But if she didn't notice that, no, she did. She had to.
Sometimes Susan knew she was being filmed. Other times, she had no idea. We found one tape not even Steve realized he was recording. That captured the moment that he professed his love for her.
Steve wanted Josh out of the picture. He wrote in his journal that he had long known that they had an unstable relationship and that Josh was only using her as a means to a financial end. There was never any money for her to do nice things for herself, because all of their money goes to pay down the debts Josh accumulated. So this is in Steve's words, talking about how he feels about their relationship. The senior living center didn't work out. Josh wrote in his journal that the managers were asking them to break policies and laws. He escalated it to regional management and human resources, and obviously probably wasn't true because it didn't go any further than that. They thought about moving to another center in Colorado, but Josh had a bad reputation, so would have been hard for them to do that. They did pay down their debts from working there, though. Josh's debts, and they got a parakeet. So Steve visited the kids a lot, and Susan was very uneasy and spent a lot of money. Oh, Steve also spent a lot of money on a home studio to record songs for Susan. He thought he would win her over that way. And the background on Steve's computer, his desktop background, was a picture of
Susan. Oh my gosh.
He was telling his friend about his love for Susan. If I was his friend, I'd be like, you're not my friend anymore. And he said he needed to leave it alone. Pursuing a relationship with his daughter-in-law would ruin his family.
Right.
Now Vicky's gonna finish all this wonderful stuff.
This is pretty interesting from this point on. And it gives a lot of more insight into Steve's craziness. Excuse me, my throat is bad today, along with my foot. On July 13th, and this is 2003, Josh wanted to change his career and drive a big rig. Steve was there and offered to give... So while he was driving away in this truck, Steve was there and he offered to give Susan a ride to her parents' house. Of course, Crazy Steve is videotaping everything. And he also had the microphone going so you could hear the conversation.
He thought, though, that it was turned off, so he didn't realize that the video was off, but the microphone was on.
Right, he had stuffed it in a bag or something.
Yeah.
And this is where, in this conversation, he professed his love for her, to her. Now, keep in mind, Susan was 21, Steve was 53, and she is his daughter-in-law. And he asked her if she was going to talk to Josh about this, and she said she talked to Josh about everything.
Yeah, after the fact. So we will put in that conversation, or as much as I can put in, so you hear the awkwardness and the...
Right, it's a little muffled because it is in the bag. He has it in the bag.
Yeah.
But you can hear what he's saying.
I fantasize that she'll come down here and join me, but so far that's a daydream that hasn't come true.
It'd be great to go to Colorado and see a different part of the U.S., you know?
Yeah, I'm probably wrong, but I've really fallen in love with you. Maybe I'm interpreting something that I shouldn't be interpreting. You know, it just, for example, when we were sitting on the couch, it just felt like you were very, you know, I mean, I was extremely aroused, and I think you were somewhat aroused, at least I thought.
I don't know where you're going with this.
Susan, well, I'll tell you where
I'm married to your son, and I should just be the daughter-in-law.
I know.
Which puts me a step beneath your own children.
Okay.
And that's where I'm comfortable. Just kind of meaning to talk to you about this. My own father doesn't kiss me, and you kiss me, and I didn't like that.
And you don't want me to hug you either.
He wrote in his journal how upset he was about it. And he talked to his daughter Alina, who was supportive of his infatuation, and he needs to accept Susan is a player. So Alina is encouraging him that Susan is really coming on to him.
And this is what they do. Yeah.
And yeah. So let's see what else is happening here.
There was a lot. And we were just trying to get as much as we could to give you some background into this, because it just draws you in and you're like, oh my gosh, and you just feel so horrible for this girl and what she had to put up with.
Well, Steve had been listening to the tape of the conversation, and he was analyzing it, and in his mind he decided that she did not reject him.
Because he's so sane.
Susan told Josh, and he became unglued and said insanity starts in his family. Steve turned it around and said the insanity started with Susan and that she came on to him. So Josh kept his distance from his father for a couple of months, but when they talked on the phone, Josh made sure she wasn't in the room.
Because she was livid whenever.
Right, she didn't.
Yeah, she said if I had fur, it would bristle every time I knew he was talking to him.
Steve wrote, by September, Steve wrote in his journal that he believed that Josh was coming around to his point of view, and that Susan did entice Steve.
Girl.
Susan didn't want anything to do with Steve and would lock herself in a room when he would come to visit.
That's how into him she was. Oh my goodness gracious.
October of that year, they switched jobs to another senior living center in Olympia called Capitol Place, but it was closer to Steve than the other center was.
Yeah.
Josh and Susan decided to move to Utah instead. And Josh asked Steve to help them move in December 2013. Susan and Josh moved in with Jennifer and her family.
Yeah.
Jennifer was concerned by the interactions she saw with Josh's controlling behavior, and Susan resisting and starting to fight back.
Yeah.
Seems that after a time, they both got jobs at Fidelity and started looking for a house. Jennifer was concerned about them doing that, knowing about Josh's inability to keep a job.
So I think Susan was in customer service and Josh was in data entry.
Right, and again, he thought he was above doing data entry.
Never learned that you have to start somewhere. That's what I told my kids. You got to start somewhere.
Exactly.
Don't expect it all at once.
Exactly. Well, he wasn't exactly starting at this point, and
This is true.
He knew.
Right. Well, it's a new company, so.
Right.
Yeah.
But in every situation he was in, he thought he was above it.
Right. He just never
got it. And in late January, they looked at a house, and it was on Sarah Circle, asking and praying for a miracle. These jobs were temporary jobs, and apparently it wasn't noted on
their stubs that they were temporary, so.
That's why they were praying and hoping for a miracle. Josh wrote about the spirit, but Josh had abandoned his faith around January in his other writings.
Yeah, so he's trying to ask for the help, even though he's saying, well, I don't believe in this stuff, so.
Okay. Chuck Cox, Susan's dad, didn't know why they moved forward with buying the house. Susan at that time was the only one supporting the family. When Susan moved to Utah, she started meeting friends at church and received a calling in the church ward working with young women. Steve still talked to Josh with hours on the phone. Susan continued to struggle with his relationship, with Josh's relationship with Steve.
Yeah, which anybody would have.
Right. In June, Susan became a full-time worker with Fidelity and got benefits which covered the family. And at the same time, Susan realized she was pregnant. So she was happy to have those benefits.
Yeah. Since she's the only one supporting them.
Right. Susan got her stockbroker's license while she was pregnant and was the breadwinner. In 2015, January 15th, 2005 rather, Susan went into labor with Charlie. And this is interesting. Chuck said Josh was more concerned with his computer than Susan having the baby. Chuck said Josh had fear in his eyes when the baby was being born. Then when Charlie was born, he seemed to be very proud.
Yeah, so when it's all going through it, and then when she's going through it, it's like, oh no, this is really happening. And then after she had him, he was just like, oh, I'm the big dad now. And I'm...
Yeah. I believe there is, when she was in labor, Chuck actually went over to Josh, closed his laptop, and said, you need to get over there.
Yeah.
You need to get over there and
There was some
support
prompting
your
on
wife.
his part, yeah.
Susan went back to work in 5 weeks after having the baby.
Which was torture. I mean, any mother going back to work knows it's
It's
very hard.
difficult.
Yeah.
Josh at that time was trying to get his real estate license. Susan talked to her bishop at the church. She told them both to go to marriage counseling. Apparently she was telling the bishop about her feelings about Josh, her father-in-law, Josh's inability to keep a job, and, really letting her heart out to the bishop. And he said, you two need to go to marriage counseling.
Yeah.
Josh stopped going to church after counseling. At this point in their relationship, Josh was not affectionate at all with her.
Yeah.
He didn't want to have relations. She said he seemed to be afraid she would get pregnant again. He didn't even want to kiss her. Josh said in his journals when he was younger he could cuddle and fool around a little bit, but had to go away to maintain his comfort zone. He's not into kissing and holding hands.
Yeah, he's just... I don't know.
And Catherine, his previous girlfriend, confirmed this.
Yeah.
She said in the beginning they would cuddle and hold hands. When they moved in with each other, he wouldn't do that anymore. He said he felt sick when they would kiss.
Yeah, that is crazy.
Josh told Susan the same thing.
Yeah, but, oh, I can't kiss you because I'll feel sick. I mean... And that
So
in a young
bizarre.
woman's mind is probably like, what the hell?
Her self-esteem was ruined by this.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, whose
think
would
so.
it be?
Yeah, and I think, you know what? That's a controlling thing.
Yeah.
He probably knew that would, make them a little unstable and think about themselves and worry about themselves. So that's a very controlling thing for someone to do to someone else.
Right.
So
I agree with that.
Yeah. Which he did. He controlled everything.
By Valentine's Day of 2006, Josh and Susan talked about the logistics of divorce. But Josh was so devastated when his parents divorced, he would not let this happen.
Yeah.
This is the beginning of his mindset towards her and what would happen
Right.
if she left him. And after they talked, Susan wrote a letter saying she didn't want Charlie to grow up the way he did. And she wants her and Josh to be together and for the marriage to work.
Yeah. Yeah, she didn't want her kids to go through it. And she still loved Josh. So she was definitely...
She also said she would keep working and at Fidelity and not spending money.
Yeah, and this is the thing about this. She put it all on her. To try to make it work, she had to change. She had to change this. She had to change that. She had to stop, she only drove from work and to daycare, and she wouldn't drive anymore. I guess Josh didn't like her doing hair on the side, so she'd have to go to the other person's house to do the hair. Everything had to change on her end. He could do what he did. And continue to do it.
She was really trying to make it work.
She really was.
Let's see now. I think I remember seeing an episode, and I can't remember what show it was, where if she served a hot dog, and they didn't eat the whole hot dog, the baby didn't eat the whole hot dog, he would really give her a hard time and told her to only use the amount that the
Oh my goodness
baby would
gracious.
eat. Like he was bringing in the money.
Yeah, he dictated everything, unfortunately. But he could spend whatever he wanted on electronics and that sort of thing.
She kept reading her scriptures for both of them. Mm-hmm. And he would...
Even though he wasn't into it, but...
No. He would scan everything, like all notes and receipts that she had.
Yeah, so she said, I'll even try to scan more. Like, crazy. Everything. He would scan envelopes when he got letters from people. He scanned everything.
He was so controlling of her that he wanted her to edit her teenage boyfriend out of her journals and get rid of pictures that she had from like her high school dances. He really brought her to the point where any woman who was abused to that level is not going to realize that you're being abused to that level.
Yeah, you don't. She didn't resist that. She didn't do it, but at that point you'd think, oh my gosh, yeah, you're nuts. You're really going overboard when it comes to this stuff. This was my life. I can't just cut out a part of my life because you weren't in it.
Meanwhile, their finances were beginning to beginning to deteriorate again. And she quit the job in May of 2000, and they took out a second mortgage because Josh's real estate business was collapsing. And they found out that Susan was pregnant again.
With Braden.
Yeah. Josh took out a full-page ad in a phone book for his real estate business, but didn't pay because he said they had printed a wrong phone number.
Yeah. So they fought. He fought with them, and
he got sued.
Yeah.
For $90,000. It's been one heck of an ad.
That would be, yeah.
I don't, but geez.
I don't know how long it ran, but I guess, jeez.
It's in a phone book, so it's there. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. Braden was born January 2nd, 2007. Josh wanted to name him Brady, but Suzanne did not want that.
Yeah, because of the Brady Bunch.
Right, so they settled on Braden.
But I don't mind Brady because that was my maiden name.
It was?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. I think it's cute, actually.
Yeah.
They had one car. She was really rarely able to drive it. Mm-hmm. In April of 2007, they filed for bankruptcy. Josh had $30,000 in credit card debt, $59,000 in student loan, and almost $100,000 due to the phone book ad. Mm-hmm. He also owed Chuck Cox $3,000, but he also named that in the bankruptcy filing.
Yeah, so he wouldn't have to pay that back. That's nice. Your own father-in-law. The
2008 recession happened. Josh talked about political and social views was becoming extreme, his vocalizing about his politics and his social views. He talked about coming environmental catastrophes where the world would run short of water. He told Susan they might need to leave the U.S. in a hurry.
I mean, if it's the whole world. Okay. Maybe go where it's snowy there, but you know.
So Susan started growing a garden and making bread due to the money and Josh's beliefs. Mm-hmm. He didn't appreciate anything she did.
No.
And, she felt very alone. Mm-hmm. By the start of 2008, Susan realized they both had to get jobs. She landed a job at Wells Fargo and was the breadwinner again.
Yeah, that's the pattern for them.
She felt like a single mother, thought that would happen if she was not married, and figured this was better than the alternative.
Yeah, so even though she did feel like a single mother, she figured it's better to be with someone than without. Even though she probably wouldn't have had all those bills if she was the single mother at that point.
I guess it's, again, that women that are controlled like that are abused.
Yeah.
It's a mental abuse. Mm-hmm. And they don't see a way out of it.
Yeah.
They just can't understand the way of moving forward on their own.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And we will put in a phone number for any woman who's in this situation, can reach out to get help if they're in any kind of domestic abuse situation.
Right.
And there's also is it an email or a website you can go to?
Find it, yeah.
And we'll put that in there as well.
Yeah, because even though we might not be able to find Susan, and in our later videos you'll see why it's probably not likely. If this helps anybody, if you're listening to this and thinking, oh my gosh, that's me or that's him, and you might want to talk to someone about it. So,
and sometimes that's all it takes, is to hear someone describing the situation, and you relate
realize
to it.
That's your life. Yeah.
And I really hope that it does make people wake up,
right,
and move out of that situation.
Yeah. If it's always you that has to change, there's probably something that isn't right in that relationship. So
exactly.
Yeah. But then I guess that's it. And we will, like I said, we'll continue with this series, and I guess that's all we have for now. So
that's all we have. Please comment and let us know your thoughts on this, and we will move forward with this sad story.
Yep.
And hope it helps someone.
Yes. Yeah. All right.
All right.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.